will have a technique to find those associations that you have with your coworkers and piece them together in a way that's useful to us.
Yeah, and a funny thing about what he was saying is when you start to gather the caller ID database, if you try to buy it from like Targus or something like that, like I said, you're going to spend a lot of money. There's going to be a record of it, and you're going to get lots of ridiculous stuff in there. And when you start to use like the back spoofing technique to just selectively update certain areas. So let's say you only want to update phone numbers that are in Sandiego. Well, you can do that on a daily basis using these techniques, and you can start to combine that ability with some of these other intelligence techniques that we'll be presenting, and put it all together into some giant, scary intelligence gathering tool. And so, back spoofing is very easy and it's been very well known. So you just get a VoIP provider that has caller ID lookups enabled on an incoming DID and on an incoming phone number to, let's say, an asterisk box. And you just make a phone call outbound back to that number that you control, spoofing the caller ID outbound. So I make a call outbound spoofing Don's cell phone number here. It goes out, they do the lookup, and they send it back to me, and then I just log it.
And it's important to note the legality, right? So as many of you know, a little bill was passed, or is in the process of being passed.
Blackhead. Do we have to talk about the legality of these? Come on.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that this new legalese states that it's illegal to deceive or defraud, right? But you're actually implementing a call to yourself.
Hey, Don, is this my water or your water?
That would be, I don't know, we all have the same germs.
Yeah, we've been working together for a while.
Yours.
It's all good.
Anyway, so what's actually pretty cool is that the way this technique works is, it's back spoofing. It's going right back to your own system, right? So you're not defrauding anybody because there's no monetary transaction involved except for what you're already guaranteed to pay for. And second of all, you're not actually deceiving anybody because you're receiving the call. You know you placed the call. You know it's coming back to you. You just mark it down in your little record as debugging.
And remember, criminals don't care about legality. So the criminals and the bad guys, they're going to do this stuff anyway. We're just telling you this for your edification. Mm-hmm. And another thing about doing the back spoofing technique is that you can get in trouble with it. I mean, it's kind of a violation of the terms of service. For instance, if you abuse the lookup privilege. So certain VoIP providers actually don't charge you to do the caller ID lookup. They throw it in because maybe you're paying a flat fee or something like that, or a fat fee. And regardless, there are some providers that will charge you maybe, they'll have that cost and they'll pass some of it on to you. So it'll cost you, 0.08 cents. And if you start to do 10,000 lookups a day, short little bursts of calls that don't actually connect and don't make them money, they might say, hey, we're paying for all this and, we're going to cut you off. But the ones that actually charge you a little bit of money, they'll be less likely to do that because they're not footing the entire bill. So just something to keep in mind when you're doing that technique. And of course, like we said, the advantages and disadvantages of getting a service and buying a database versus just doing the back spoofing technique. Specifically is these websites like bulkzname.com, and there's other ones out there like that. They charge about $100 per 1,000 lookups. And of course, these caller ID databases that they have, they're not totally up to date. And so if you can get different VoIP providers that advertise, oh, I use the AT&T caller ID database, I use the Verizon caller ID database, et cetera, or we have our own, whatever, that's going to be higher quality and more up-to-date information that you'll be pulling versus if you go through some random website like this.
Yeah, so you don't have to do your math yourself. Essentially, what we're seeing as far as cost right now, 10,000 lookups is charging us about a little less than $30. So you can see the difference, right? Obviously, it's cost effective to do it with our technique. So.
And you get better data.
So, of course, the main idea here is to actually develop, as we said, your own white pages. But, what exactly is that really going to get you?
Celebrity phone numbers.
Celebrity
Who wants to call Megan Fox? Anybody? Megan Fox's
Nobody
phone
here?
number?
Come on, this is Black Hat and DEF CON, right? Yeah.
Come on, I know it's the last talk of the last day,
yeah,
but we're auctioning Megan Fox's cell phone number off. Anybody? Any takers? $5.
Oh.
That's pretty much what she charges anyway. Yes. Was that on tape? I'm talking to you, Megan.
think that's going to cost more than $5.
Ooh.
TMZ, give me a call.
Yeah.
I'm dating Megan Fox now.
I don't know if I should just leave now or stay here. Okay, anyway, so the cool thing is that we can filter, right? I mean, if I know you work for a large corporation and I care about your corporation, I want to steal your data, and it's relevant to me to get all your phone numbers. I'm going to use this technique in the region that your company are, right? But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to filter. So this is the cool part, right? So usually what we do is we say, all right, I need a specific reason. I know your company is in Cupertino or San Diego or whatever, right? I'm going to use my old friend Nampa, right? And what I'm going to end up doing is just looking through the database saying, okay, what rate center corresponds with that specific location? And then I'm going to say, what NPA and XX actually correspond with that rate center? So, you know, for Denver, we've got 303, 947, and all kinds of different things. And you just actually say, all right, I'm going to start taking samples all over the place of these specific NPA NXX or exchange, right, area code exchanges. And you're going to look for places where you're seeing data, right? Because a lot of these are going to be unallocated. You're going to see bulk numbers that just haven't been allocated yet. Because even, you know, unlike IPv4,
it's almost like a dark net of phone numbers.
It's kind of weird. Like even though there are millions of people in the United States, somehow we have tons of unlisted, unused numbers, even though IPv4 is you know, dying severely. So it's kind of weird. But you know, it's cool because that makes it really easy for me, right? So if I just go out and pull these, you know, take samples of all these ranges, then I know specifically, oh, hey, your company is probably over here because I'm seeing tons of lookups resolving versus over here I see a bunch of unavailable, and that doesn't mean anything to me. So I figure out where you're most likely to be, and then I isolate my scan there, and then from there I can proceed accurately and get a really high percentage of probability that I'm going to hit your company. And we succeed pretty much 99% of the time.
Yeah, and another thing right here, the HLR records to determine the real provider, that's very important. We touched on that just a little bit ago. The main reason why we want to know what provider you have is because if I'm doing a scan in, let's say, Rhode Island, which has like 4 people in it, you know, as you're scanning it, you're going to find 3 entries for, you know, an individual. It'll be their landline, maybe the second landline, and their cell phone number. And they're probably all going to look exactly the same. So it may say J. Smith for 3 numbers. You don't know which one is which. So when you go to HLR, HLR will at least tell you, okay, this isn't a cell phone number, this isn't a cell phone number, but this is, and it's AT&T or T-Mobile or whatever. So that's when we're trying to do provider-specific attacks or cell phone-specific attacks, we don't want to be attacking landlines. That's dumb and wasteful. And if you're trying to do this on a mass scale, you just want to get all that stuff out of the way. You want to focus on you know, the devices that you want to actually attack, which are cell phones. So, or the individual behind that cell phone. So that's where the HLR stuff comes into play. It at least tells us that, yes, out of these 3 numbers, this one is the cell phone, and it's on this provider. And if you have specific attacks for that provider, then go ahead and use them. And that's high confidence information. So if you go look up in the NPAN database, you know, for the list of all of AT&T owned numbers, that isn't always updated. That's not always up to date. So it might say that, you know, this person's number is owned by AT&T. Well, they could have ported it to T-Mobile yesterday, and HLR will tell us that. So if we were going to try to launch an attack against somebody that was maybe specific to AT&T, it might fail. It might give up. It might fail in a bad way, in a noisy way that they might notice and make them suspicious. So at least now we say, okay, they're T-Mobile now. You know, we can start to target this.
And there's also another important thing to remember is that companies merge, right?
Yeah.
And anybody that has looked at this database before knows that it's filled with companies that no longer even exist, right? And a lot of those companies, you know, those numbers, those ranges are still associated with those particular companies, but larger companies like AT&T, T-Mobile, or whatever will buy those ranges of numbers and then allocate them to whatever purposes they have. So it's important to go out there and say, hey, you know, what region am I looking at? What mergers occurred in this region or whatever? And that's, again, where HLR really comes into play here and is so important because you, instead of looking for thousands and thousands of numbers, if you're looking for AT&T in a region where, hey, there is no AT&T in this database, you know they've bought ranges from someone else, or have been allocated ranges from a dead company. You just don't know where. So you can take quick samples and find those HLR records that match with the provider you're looking for, and awesome, you're on your way.
Excuse me, I don't think AT&T acquires other companies ever.
That's just a rumor, I guess. So this is just a simple entry that I thought was funny. Haha.
Wang Chung?
This is just a little example of the kinds of things that we see.
Are you going to do the Wang Chung for us?
I may dance a little bit later because I've got the shoes.
What happened to the Wang Institute entry?
Yeah, we have a lot of interesting stuff. So we wanted to add the slides, but frankly, we have too many damn slides.
Do we have that slide where it shows all that stuff?
No, I'll just briefly explain it. So it's weird when you're actually looking through the CNAME database, right? Because you see all kinds of strange entries all over the place. And the most interesting one that we found is Shell Company.
Yeah.
Right?
It was like a couple numbers. Shell Company.
No, there's a block of 10 numbers. They're all cell phones, and it's Shell Company, one after another. Hilarious. And you can see...
Not shady at all.
Not shady. You can find embassies, the FBI, you can find all kinds of things. Things, people, and crazy stuff, things that you wouldn't want to say here. And if you want to, after the talk, feel free to come talk to me, and I will show you on my laptop.
Is that why we're not doing it?
Yeah, that's really kind of why.
So I'm independent, so I have nothing to lose right now. But I guess we'll not show that slide.
Yeah, if you want to see some funny things, just talk to me after the talk.
Yeah, but there was a really funny entry. It was called the Wang Institute, and I sent that screenshot to some of my friends, and I said you should probably call them for a consultation. I'm sure they'll help you out with your problem. And they were upset at me.
So we want to briefly cover what you actually see in the database, right? Because not everything is going to be a name. That's just a fact, okay? There's a huge number of numbers, and they all result in all kinds of crap. So the first two things that you see up there are crap, right? You've got wireless caller and unavailable. The first one is far less important and interesting than the second one, okay? The first one just means, oh, you ported to a company that actually has CNAME database entries, but because it's been ported and it's been ported for a company that didn't have caller ID database entries, you now suddenly end up with wireless caller. So very boring. It just means that more likely, there's probably like an 80% chance that this has actually been a ported number from another provider. Unavailable.
Touching on that real quick.
Yeah.
So a lot of the CDMA providers, they don't put we notice CDMA providers don't put your name in the caller ID database. Only the GSM providers do, and that's just something that we've noticed. Maybe there is an exception. Maybe there are exceptions somewhere.
We should say the major providers.
The major providers, yeah.
Don't.
And so
we haven't analyzed all of the smaller ones.
And we've also noticed how sometimes we'll see if somebody from some GSM provider then ports the number to a CDMA provider that normally doesn't do that. Well, I've noticed actually, and I've showed this to you, that the caller ID entry actually remains. It's almost as if that provider that you ported to doesn't then go and add, wireless entry, wireless caller or unavailable in that entry. They don't overwrite what the old entry was from that other provider that added the entry. Mm-hmm. So your name and that number stay even though you ported it to a CDMA provider. So just by looking at all these different use cases, a person porting to CDMA or a person porting from CDMA, et cetera, you can start to uncover the behavior of these providers and how they interact with caller ID databases and who's sharing what databases, et cetera.
Yeah, it's really cool because you can actually begin to see trends, right? So, you see formats of names like first name, last name, or whatever, and you start to identify, oh, hey, this is so-and-so provider, that's so-and-so provider. And that's why the HLR is so important because we can see that, oh, it's a ported number, blah, 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 they're ported to a CDMA or whatever, but they used to be on so-and-so. And eradicating those anomalies are really important.
And one of the things with the HLR providers is you don't get information for CDMA providers. So you're not going to get information on CDMA. This is all GSM targeted. Although there was one particular company where we found that a CDMA provider was giving us an MSC value in return. It was kind of odd because that wasn't supposed to happen. They didn't even advertise that they support these people. And so we decided to call technical support. So we called technical.
This was a great call too. I wish we would have recorded it. It was
like
really
4 a.m. When we were doing our first talk at Source Boston, and we're like, we shouldn't be seeing MSC values for a CDMA provider here. They don't support this, but there's a number coming back. So it has nothing to really do. This is a tangent, but we called them up, and they were like, "Oh, hello, sir. Who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, my name's Mike."